All right, we are on the air now. I am Joe Truscott. I'm very happy to be here with you this evening to have a distinguished panel of civil grand jury experts talk to us. And we're going to talk a lot about the purpose of the grand jury, how you get into the grand jury, and the things that the grand jury can investigate. And to start the whole show off, I'm very pleased to have Judge Stephanie Hulsey here. So, Stephanie, tell us a little bit about where the civil grand jury fits into the whole structure.
Happy to, Joe. And first, I do want to thank you for not only for your service as a prior civil grand juror in the county of Monterey, but for giving us this opportunity to help build awareness around the civil grand jury and the fact that it is so important that we have community members who are willing and able to volunteer an entire year of their time to investigating local government entities to make sure that our government entities are working as efficiently as possible, that they are utilizing public funds efficiently, and they are serving the whole of our community in the best way possible. So how do we start? First of all, we do have a recruitment, and actually March, which it is still March, is Civil Grand Jury Awareness Month. So this is very timely. We will be recruiting throughout the month of April. May 1st is the deadline for the applications. Oftentimes we hear that the civil grand jury is thought of as a watchdog for government and governmental entities. I like to think of the civil grand jury more as a guardian for our public government entities, investigating in detail the operations of our local agencies and making recommendations for improvement. The focus of the civil grand jury is oversight, accountability, and recommendations for improvement. And I like to also remind people that there is a constitutional mandate here in the state of California for the entity of the civil grand jury. Article 1, Section 23 actually requires that each of our 58 counties impanel a civil grand jury each and every year. And that just is an indication of the importance to our democracy of the civil grand jury. When we were preparing to go on the air this evening, one of the people who was here before us said, civil grand jury reeks of democracy. And I think anybody would agree that participation in self-government is a critical component of any working democracy. The civil grand jury provides a very meaningful way to participate in this oversight role.
Good. We're now going to hear from Arthur Rolston, who is one of the chief trainers of civil grand juries. Arthur, tell us a little bit about the whole process of what has to happen for you to be considered to be on a grand jury.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you for having us here, giving us a wonderful opportunity to talk about this institution, which is unique to California. California is the only state in the country that every year has every county impanel a group of citizens to look over the operations of local government. And no other state in the union has this, and it's something that California's had, and it's really makes our government much more really accountable and efficient. That's the whole idea.
How long has this been going on? When did they decide to do it?
Well, when did California start to do it?
Right.
With the California Constitution in 1849, the first one. And what happened was that originally the grand juries were designed to to have a criminal function because originally you could not charge a person with a felony unless the person was indicted by a grand jury.
Oh.
What happened is that California developed an alternative system of having complaint and information with a preliminary hearing before a magistrate that replaced the grand jury process in the criminal side in California. And starting in the 1870s, the California legislature started passing statutes that gave the grand jury a civil function to overlook local government. Mm-hmm. And that's been going on since the 1870s and 1880s when those sections were written.
One of the things that how I got recruited to be on the grand jury was talking to someone else who had been on the grand jury. It is a sort of a great recruiting tool.
It is, because it's a very unique experience. I served on the Santa Cruz Civil Grand Jury during the COVID year, and our grand jury, because of COVID, did everything via Zoom or remotely. And we actually did not meet each other face to face until our term was literally almost over. It was June of 2021 when we were able to meet in person. And I can tell you that we still, 5 years later, this is now 2026, our grand jury, members of it, get together for lunch once a month, and that's still going on. That's how much we enjoyed being together and working together.
Yeah, we have local alumni associations, so to speak, of civil grand jury associations. I'm going to ask Gary Hoffmann now to tell us a little bit about the application process. How do people sign up to be on the grand jury?
Yeah, again, I'll follow up with Arthur and say thank you for this opportunity. Monterey County has made it a lot easier to do it. You can actually apply now online. Now, the key here is that you are not guaranteed to be on the grand jury. There are qualifications, and again, people can review those qualification requirements online, and then it becomes a lottery to actually be selected to serve. So it's, I think, important for folks to realize that applying does not guarantee your spot on the grand jury, but also recognize that if a person is not selected on the grand jury, being an alternate is a very important position to hold throughout the year, because oftentimes alternates become selected.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about the selection process? And Judge Hulsey certainly is involved in the selection. Maybe you should give us some, I don't know, let people know how an interview goes, because all applicants are all applicants interviewed and looked over? Or?
Yes, I can't recall a situation where we received an application and an interview did not take place unless somebody decided to withdraw or had to withdraw their name for one reason or another. The Monterey County Superior Court in Monterey and Santa Cruz County Superior Court, I'm sure, in Santa Cruz, is the lead for the recruitment. Once the grand jury is seated, then county council takes over most of the training process. So with regard to the recruitment, the applications are made through the Monterey County Superior Court website. The County of Monterey website may also have applications on their website, but they are all funneled to the court. We have a dedicated person in our jury services unit who goes through all of the applications and contacts the people who have applied and sets up interviews. So we have an entire day or afternoon of interviews in Salinas. We have another half day of interviews in Monterey, and we also have interviews for those folks in South County that would prefer to have their interviews there.
Right.
So we have myself, as well as other personnel from the Monterey County Superior Court, to include judges, former members of the civil grand jury, and also members of our staff who conduct the interviews. Usually there are 2 people who are conducting the interviews, so every single person is asked the same questions, so it is fair all the way around. I would say that the interviews probably last about half an hour to 45 minutes per interview. Once the interviews have been completed, there is an evaluation process, and then there is scoring that is done based upon the evaluation process. And then the top 30 applicants potentially are going to be nominated by the judges of the Superior Court. So a recommendation as the civil grand jury advisor for the court, I take the input from everybody who's conducted the interviews and make a recommendation to the judges for the nomination of 30 people to sit on the civil grand jury. Then we vote at our judges meeting. And sometimes judges may be familiar with one or more individuals, so there certainly is input from the entire bench with regard to the nominations. Once the nominations have occurred, then the 30 people who've been nominated are notified, and they come to the impanelment, which is a very, I wouldn't say solemn, but it is a very special.
I was scared.
It is a very special occasion because we are giving our thanks and saying farewell to the civil grand jurors who have recently completed their year. And at the same time, we are going to be drawing the names. So somebody said it's essentially a lottery. It's a lottery after the judges have nominated the individuals who they feel are best suited to serving. And then the names are drawn, and the first 19 individuals will be those individuals who are sworn as civil grand jurors. And then the courtroom clerk continues to draw the names, and the remaining 11 names are alternates who would be called in the order in which their names have been drawn should somebody be unable to serve for an entire year,
right.
Which is, as was mentioned previously, is not an unusual situation.
The next step in this whole process is the training part of it.
Yeah, Santa Cruz is a very similar program. I can't speak for what the judges do because I'm not one of the judges, but I can say that the process is almost identical. In Santa Cruz, frequently the interviews are remotely conducted, so people especially from South County, don't have to drive up just for an interview. Interviews are everybody who applies is interviewed. Usually there's 3 or 4 people attending on the judge and 1 or 2 other people attending and ranking the people. The top 30 people are nominated, and again their names are put in a hat, or names are drawn, and the first 19 are the sitting jurors, and the remainders are alternates in the order. The one thing I'll follow up on what Gary said is that in almost every county that I've been familiar with, almost every alternate ends up serving. Being an alternate doesn't usually, because what happens is life happens. People are in the first 30 and they have to, for one reason or another, they resign, or they just can't do it. The alternates come in. That happens.
We're going to talk about the work that's involved in the grand jury in a little bit, but I do want to get to the training program because I think it's one, at least in my experience, I've been through several different kinds of training programs, and I think the one that was offered by our local grand juries is one of the best that I've went through. It was so practical and gave us a real good basis for starting our job.
That's really important because the law requires that every grand juror, incoming civil grand juror, be trained in how to do the work that they're going to be doing for that year. an all-volunteer nonprofit organization called the Civil Grand Jurors Association of California, the CGJA. It's an all-volunteer organization. It currently provides training for 54, at the last count of California's 58 counties. Mm-hmm. And we have 39 volunteers who go around the state who are trainers. Kim is, who you'll meet later, is a trainer. Gary Hoffmann is a trainer. I've been training since 2021.
And you do a very good job.
Thank you.
A real standout.
And the training has a very specific curriculum, and it's the same curriculum all over the state. Mm-hmm. So no matter what county you're in, you're going to get the same basic curriculum because the law is the same. It's a statewide.
It was obvious there were a lot of good heads involved in deciding what needs to be trained and how to do it.
I happen to be on the curriculum committee that every year goes through the entire training, every word in the manual that you get, every slide that's shown, and every word, everything that's said during the presentation of those slides is worked on meticulously by a committee of nine or 10 people. Right. Every year it's revised to try and make it better.
And it's revised, if I could add, Joe, it's revised to reflect the comments that we solicit from those being trained so that we can adapt the program to meet their needs that they've talked about how to improve the program. So it's an evolving process that the CSC, the curriculum committee, goes through every off-season, so to speak, to improve the program.
Why don't you go through some of the topics that are covered in the training program, because I think that'll describe the job itself in a little more detail.
Well, Arthur's a lawyer, and so he goes through the legal aspects in the training, but we also give the
legal aspects mean what you can and cannot do.
What you can and cannot do as a civil grand jury, the jurisdiction aspect of the grand jury service. And then we go into telling or informing folks how to go about the job or the tasks at hand, how to conduct investigations, what kind of questions to ask, what the processes are. Grand jurors have ultimate responsibility. They serve no one but themselves. They have autonomy from any governmental entity, and that's for a purpose, so that there's no influence from a political perspective. So, which is very important to the operation. So the training really gives guidance to incoming civil grand jurors on how to investigate any topic that they believe needs to be looked at in local government. And I don't know how much detail, Joe, you want me to go into, but how to do interviews.
Well, I definitely want people to understand how much work is involved and the kind of work and the kind of skills that someone will find the work more interesting and be better able at accomplishing it.
Well, a lot of research is done in doing this, and also a lot of interviewing of local officials and people working, staff folks at the different entities to get an understanding of how they operate. And I think it's important to point out that the civil grand jury is interested in improving the operations of different local government entities. We're not interested in second-guessing political decisions that are based, or policy decisions, strictly operations. And that's how we try to focus and guide civil grand jurors into simply looking at the operations. Mm-hmm.
And that's for a very important reason, because there's case law that says that the policy, the large issues over how much money is going to be spent, who they hire, who they fire, those are policy decisions that are not up to the civil grand jury. The civil grand jury is not an HR department. They're not doing a performance evaluation. Mm-hmm. And the focus is on the problems, not the people. And that's really, really important.
Let me ask Judge Hulsey to talk about what entities can be investigated. So we're talking about government, and what's government mean?
Yes, any local governmental entity. And most people, of course, are aware of various agencies that they may come into contact with. I won't name them, but it could be our people who are first responders, people that we see who are part of a governmental entity, certainly our city councils, and other county organizations, city organizations. But some people aren't even aware of some of the local governmental entities that we have. In fact, I wasn't aware of all of them until I was the legal advisor for the civil grand jury. So, for example, the airport board, or some of our agricultural entities. And as a matter of fact, even a nonprofit organization, if they are receiving local governmental funds, can be the topic or the subject of a particular investigation.
So is it true that if you are an elected person, no matter who you are being elected to or what job you are, that's covered by a civil grand jury that can be investigated?
It can be, yes. In fact, there is something called an accusation that is not often done anymore by a civil grand jury, but that generally would be somebody who has been elected is the subject of an accusation if wrongdoing has been found. Now, that is not usually the vehicle of that type of investigation, because we have conflict of interest laws, in fact, criminal statutes that address the types of conduct that an accusation formally would have addressed.
Yeah, since you went down that path, let's talk about the difference between a criminal case and a civil case, or a civil grand jury case and something that's criminal jury, because people confuse those all the time.
Yes, and we actually do sit, at least in Monterey County, we actually do sit a criminal grand jury. Generally, that is, the criminal grand jury would be seated every 6 months. The district attorney may or may not decide to take a case to a criminal grand jury to come back with an indictment. And they have various reasons that they may select to go that route rather than to put on a preliminary hearing. The civil grand jury is seated not as part of that entity at all. Again, we seat our civil grand jury, and then separately the criminal grand jury is seated every 6 months. The civil grand jury is an investigative body, whereas the criminal grand jury is listening to evidence to determine whether or not they are going to return an indictment.
Well, thank you. That's a very good explanation of the difference between the two. I want to get back to Gary and ask you again, the kinds of work that people do, how much time is involved in a normal week?
You mean serving on the civil grand jury, Joe?
Once you're selected, you've gone through training, now you're sitting in that room, the grand jury room, wherever it was that you meet. How much time are you going to dedicate to that?
You know, it varies throughout the term. And again, the term starts July 1 through June 30. That's the term in Monterey County. It varies. And when we get into the investigative aspect and more towards the report writing, it can almost become, for those deeply involved in a particular investigation, almost like a full-time job, quite honestly. It takes a lot of time. Now, it's not, I would adjust that statement by saying it's not as if it's a full-time job all year long, but there are periods of time throughout the term where a person who's serving on an investigation and report writing, where it is essentially a full-time 40 hours a week, as you well know, Joe, 40-hour a week endeavor. But I will say this, it's well worth it.
Thank you. Do they always meet during the day? Do you have to be retired in order to have the time to do this? And the other question is, speaking with one voice. What does that all mean, Arthur?
Okay, let me get to your second question first. To issue, the grand jury communicates with the public in only one way, and that is through its written reports that are supported by a supermajority of the grand jury on a 19-juror that requires 12 affirmative votes. And the written report then is is passed on by the judge, and it's published. And that is the only way the grand jury communicates with the public. So the public has no idea and designed not to have any idea of what the grand jury is doing during the year. It only speaks through its written reports. Once a written report is issued, that is the report of the entire grand jury. There is no dissenting reports allowed. There are no minority reports allowed. And there are no informational reports allowed. There are requirements to go in the report, meaning they have to examine the operations of local government. If they recognize a problem, a verdict, something that's not being done as well as it could be done or efficiently, they are required to recommend a fix for it. That is what it means to speak with one voice, and it's only through their written reports. Otherwise, they're bound by confidentiality.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, Joe, and that's a real key thing to the operation of a grand jury, civil grand jury, is the confidentiality aspect of everything that goes on in the grand jury room is confidential amongst just the grand jurors, and that commitment is for life. It doesn't end when the term ends, so everything that's stated in that grand jury room, and that allows the jury members to speak freely and openly during the investigative processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have found that I get lots of questions, but the questions can all be deflected based on the report, because they'll clarify, or they'll ask a question about something or other, and it's in the report. We recommended that this is, and not only that, the concept that every recommendation requires a response, and those responses are also public information. And I'm Joe Truscott, and this is a special program here on KSQT Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale, on the civil grand jury, and I have a distinguished panel of experts here to talk about the whole service that you might be able to do if you apply to become a member of the civil grand jury. We want to talk about the meat of the issue, what gets selected. And here I have Kim Horowitz from the Santa Cruz Civil Grand Jury Association, and Tom Motley, who is a former member of the Civil Grand Jury down in Monterey, and Judge Stephanie Hulsey is here with us as well to talk about how topics are selected and what kinds of things people decide to study further. Let's talk about, Kim, why don't you talk about the complaint process, what that is?
Okay. In our county, citizens are able to fill out a complaint form either online or come down to our office and fill it out. And then that is presented to the grand jury. We look at it. And some of them we will decide that we're going to delve into a bit, at least initially. And then others maybe we don't take quite so seriously. We get a lot of repeat, interesting ones. Yeah, and then we take it from there. If we look into it, do an initial investigation of it, or not an investigation, initial research, and we find there's some there, then we may bring it back to the full jury and take a vote on it and see if it's something we want to proceed and do a full investigation of.
And the topics that you were involved in looking at, just give us a quick sort of list of what you reported on.
I wrote some down here. So I served on the 2023-2024 grand jury and again on 2024-2025. The first term I was the foreperson. My first term we did 10 reports, and I've listed some of them here. We did a housing for whom, and it looked into affordable housing, and we don't have enough of it, obviously, and what some of the holdups were there, what some of the challenges were, and that was on the city of Santa Cruz. We did an investigation on the CZU fire victims and how their recovery was working, how that was working out. Was it proceeding as it was supposed to? We did also a really extensive investigation on county mental health treatment and the fact that South County is underrepresented. And we did another one on mental health treatment within the jails, within our county jail. And we did a really good one on road conditions in Santa Cruz County, rural road conditions and repairs on them. So that's just a few examples.
Sure. Tom, how about yourself? What kinds of things that we report on down in Monterey?
Well, in the jury that I served on last year in Monterey County, our big report was on the condition or the deteriorating conditions of the Monterey wharves. We did a report on that, which was a very technical report, very involved, and required a lot of expertise and deep research. So that was a big one. We also did a report on traffic. How do you communicate traffic problems or road safety problems, really, road safety? We found that the jury found that it was a hodgepodge of ways for citizens to report problems to the right entity, whether it be a county thing, county issue, a city issue, or something in between overlapping situation. It was very confusing to citizens how to go about making those complaints and drawing attention to the problems that needed to be addressed. So we wrote a report on that and gave some good solutions to the citizens that read the report on how they could approach those problems.
And again, what initiated those two reports? How did you decide the wharf was an issue, or the gobbledygook involved in trying to find the right person to report a pothole or a broken sidewalk?
Yeah, well, in the case of the wharves, there were several studies done in the past. They were not acted on, and one of the grand jury that was seated before us was given one of the technical reports about these studies, and they could not address it. They didn't have the time and resources to address it in their term, so they passed it on as just a piece of data to the new jury that I was on. We looked at that report, and we decided that was content worth pursuing. So we delved into it and did the research, and we uncovered that there had been other reports, other studies, and the county had been paying money for all these consultants to look at the conditions, to measure problems, to put together estimates of the corrections and all that sort of thing, but nothing had been spent towards making those corrections. And the system that would fund those corrections had some flaws in it. So we dug in and we went through all the details, and we found out what was the limitations of what was going on. In the middle of our actual investigations, and as we were putting together the data for the report, sure enough, the Santa Cruz wharf fell into the ocean. So all of a sudden, the rationale for writing a report on this became a little more important. So that spurred us on quite a bit.
And we talked about before impaneling a group of people who do not know each other, who all of a sudden have to work together. And as it turns out, we were very fortunate in that particular report to have the expertise of really smart civil engineers who knew what those reports were. And everyone is different. I'm going to have Kim talk a little bit about some of your investigations and how you put together that topic and how you organize. You were a four-person. We should talk about what a four-person is, too. So go ahead and let us know.
So the question is, how did we choose topics?
How did you choose one of those topics that you decided on, and what was some of the process involved in getting the information?
So there's different processes you can use. When I was four-person, we did a short and sweet process. We did a brainstorming session. People went up and put colored dots on the ones that they were interested in, and the top 10, or I think it was top 10, we decided those were the ones that we were going to do, and leaving open the fact that if other things came up, if other topics came up during the term, that we could investigate those as well.
And were there times when you decided not to pursue something that you
Sure.
thought you were going to?
Sure, you might start an investigation and find out there's no there, and drop it, and that happens fairly often. Mm-hmm. You have to be open to the fact that may happen, even though you may have put a lot of work into it.
I'm going to have Judge Hulsey talk about the role of the county council in this. And county council is the county's chief legal advisor, right?
Correct. And there are several statutory advisors for the civil grand jury. The presiding judge of the Superior Court is one, or their designee. So for the past 8 years, I've been honored to be the designee from the court. County counsel is another legal advisor or their designee. And the district attorney is another legal advisor. Finally, in limited cases, the attorney general may also be a legal advisor, the Attorney General for the state of California.
Oh.
So with regard to the legal advisor aspect of it, it really depends upon what the need is of the civil grand jurors and who is best suited to help address their concern or question. With regard to the training, I think I spoke earlier about the fact that at least in Monterey County, the court is really responsible for the bulk of the recruiting process. And then once the jury is impaneled, county counsel's office helps to coordinate the Civil Grand Jurors Association coming for their 2-day training. The county also provides training by helping to introduce the civil grand jurors to all of the departments in the county. County counsel, of course, is the legal advisor for all of the departments in the county, so they are best suited to making the arrangements to familiarize the grand jury with all of the departments. I also wanted to pipe in with regard to what the civil grand jury investigates, and of course, the judges or legal advisors don't know anything about the complaints. Those are also confidential. Those go straight to the civil grand jury. However, the penal code does provide that one thing that each civil grand jury does need to do and is required to do is to inquire into the conditions of the jails and or prisons, which would include a juvenile hall in the county. So, for example, Monterey County has 2 state prisons, the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad, as well as Salinas Valley State Prison, as well as Monterey County Jail, and Juvenile Hall. We also have the Youth Center. So the civil grand jury does a tour of each one of those facilities. That doesn't mean that they're going to do an investigation or any other prolonged investigation or report. But that is interesting because it is the one thing that is contained within the statute that the civil grand jury is required to do.
And I have to say, we were really appreciated when we went to visit, and not only talking to the incarcerated, but also talking to the administrators. And if they were building a case or had a new program, it was a chance for them to show off the progress that they're doing. And we don't want to sort of ignore some of the conditions in the prison, which are clearly underfunded and dilapidated in many cases. So we can make comments and observations about it and help the administration, I think, work towards that. You also investigated one of the prisons here in Santa Cruz, right?
The county jail, yes.
Yeah. And where is the county jail here? I'm sorry to be ignorant.
It's on Water Street.
Well, yeah, it's
You can use the mic. We can swing it around and I'll plug you in.
okay.
There you go.
The Santa Cruz County Jail is on Water Street between Ocean and the bridge over the San Lorenzo River. It's kind of in the back a little bit. If you going west on Water, you would make a right turn to get into the jail.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about the roles that are on there. What's a foreperson? What's pro tem? What's a accounting person? There is a whole process of people.
Sure. So the foreperson, I would say, is an administrative role. You keep the trains running on time. You build teamwork if you can, hopefully, because that's a big challenge. You have 19 different personalities. Some of them are very strong. Some of them come in with very definite ideas of what they want to do. And that's a big challenge for the foreperson, to build a team.
Mm-hmm. Does that happen a lot in the grand juries where someone comes in, they have one issue?
Oh, yeah.
They just have one issue. And
oh, yeah.
And how are some of the ways that you sort of resolve those kinds of issues?
Well, we decide as a team, and there's a vote. And if they have a project that they want to do, an investigation they want to do, that they don't get the majority to vote for it, they have to be a good team player and let go of it.
So it comes down again, you speak with one voice.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And what were some of your experiences with group participation and how you had to motivate people?
Well, in our jury, we, and I think like most juries probably are similar, we broke down the work into committees. So deciding what to work on, for example, it wasn't done by everybody all at once. We had some ideas, and then we turned those ideas over to a committee to go to inquire about that idea, to decide, you've heard the term, is there? Go find out if there's any meat in that subject that's worth pursuing, something that is worthy of an investigation. And then once we narrowed that down, then we ended up with a set of topics that we decided one by one to go ahead and investigate that subject. Mm-hmm. And then we had a different committee. Sometimes there are overlap in personnel, but a different committee tasked with a different focus, going after the investigation, doing the hard research, setting up interviews of governmental personnel, officials, or staff, or even non-government personnel that may have some insight to the issue that you're researching or investigating. Mm-hmm. And then that could be a long process. When you have an interview, it's not just show up. You prepare for those interviews. You develop questions in advance, and the whole committee will vote on, are these the right questions? Are they worded correctly to get the information that we're looking for from that interview? And then we conduct the interview with the person, and usually there's a small group, not the entire body of the jury, but a committee of people that are doing the interview. And once the interview's over, we debrief. Did we get the right information? Did that information lead us to another understanding? Now we need to go and interview a different person in the organization, in that government entity, to find out more about that subject. And so you just drill yourself down into the problem.
And do you have any problems getting people to come in to interview? Were there any issues?
Well, generally no, because most government officials understand what the civil grand jury is about because they've been exposed to the concept. Every once in a while, however, you find somebody that kind of dodges the request or is resistant or doesn't have the time for it. And then usually the foreperson or the foreperson pro tem will suggest, well, if you can't make it, we could ask the judge for a subpoena. And all of a sudden they get very cooperative.
Do you want to talk about subpoenas? I don't. Has it happened at all? I mean, I don't know.
I have never had to sign a subpoena for a civil grand jury investigation. Although Tom is correct, of course, that the civil grand jury does have the subpoena power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes they do become necessary because, like in Santa Cruz County, the sheriff's department for a while had a policy that their deputies would not appear before the civil grand jury without a subpoena. So it's a matter of routine. We just gave them a subpoena. They were very happy. They put it in their file and they cooperated and answered all the questions that were asked. But they wanted something in the file to cover the fact that they were there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
And Joe, I should point out that that there's group dynamics in the people you're trying to interview too. You might be very interested in interviewing a member of a staff, and they don't want to come be interviewed unless their boss knows. So it's frequently important that they don't. So you talk directly and you invite that individual to come. Everything in the interview room is completely secretive. We have an oath as jurors, but we also give the person being interviewed an oath to secrecy for life as well. So that's a very important concept because in some cases they're talking about their boss or their organization, and that could have ramifications on their own job or security or whatever might come out of that. So it's important that they know that what they say in that room stays secret to everybody else except those jurors, those 19 people. They're the only ones that know. And even the next juror doesn't know. The next jury does not get the information of the previous jury. They don't know anything about that, what happened during that year. So it's very important that that secrecy is maintained. It's part of the power of the civil grand jury.
Did you also interview individuals, Kim, when individuals who weren't government employees, but who had an insight into the problem that you were looking at?
Sure. We did interview a lot of government employees, line staff, management, administrators, but we also would interview topic experts. People who'd done research for instance, we did mental health investigations. We brought in people who were experts statewide on mental health issues.
And did they have any reluctance to talk about what they knew?
Not anybody that we interviewed, but I understand at the state level, Arthur can talk to this better than I can, but at the state level there are certain people who can't or won't.
Yeah, well, I guess it would depend on what you were looking for. But as far as private citizens coming in to talk to the civil grand jury, have you had any issues with them? Almost
never, because of the fact that they understand that it's confidential. If they need to get permission from an employer to take time off so they don't lose money, frequently they will get a subpoena, which they can then show to their employer that they have no choice, that they have to appear. But generally, no. And frequently, one of the first individuals that will be interviewed, if the investigation was brought about by a citizen's complaint, generally the citizen is the first person you're going to want to talk to see if they're against it, to see if there's any there.
Right.
Does this person know what they're talking about, or is it blowing smoke?
or what's the personal relationship between that individual?
And we've asked line staff at the county to come in for, we send them an email asking them to come in, and they're rather alarmed. So a lot of times the first response is, oh, no way, I'm not doing this, until you speak to them and they understand what it's about. And if they're still reluctant, we've had the county council step in and talk to people too as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of my fondest memories is someone coming in shaking, so afraid of what they might say, and they're first time they've ever been sworn under oath, and they just leave smiling with the biggest grins you can imagine, because they finally got a chance to talk to somebody about an issue and we're not in a judging position. So we're, specifically I'm talking about private citizens, and they get a chance to just unload all of the issues that they might have. We're rounding up the program. Is there anything that we missed that we maybe should talk about?
I would want to just emphasize the rewards of being a civil grand juror. It's a lot of work. The challenge is it takes 20, maybe 30 hours a week of your time, depending on how many committees or investigations you're involved in. But at the end, when your report comes out and you've got responses back, and you've made friends on the grand jury, like Arthur was saying, they get together once a month. I do as well with some of my jurors. It's incredibly rewarding, and you really feel like you've done something really important. And I see the grand jury as being, I think, maybe the only way an ordinary person, an ordinary citizen, can have a serious impact on local government.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to just close with one thing. There's something called the grand jury effect. A lot of times you'll be conducting an interview, and you will find, even before the report gets written, that from the questions that you asked, people that you're talking to realize there's a problem. And they actually go ahead and they try and get it fixed before your report comes out. That's wonderful. People on the grand jury are not doing it because they want pats on the back. The whole idea is you want to improve government. If they say they turned down your idea, but 5 years later it gets done because some new member of the Board of Supervisors wants to get credit for it, that's great. Your report probably put the idea in somebody's head, and it got done. And so your service had value.
Yep. You can't be a grand juror expecting to get any pats on the back or get credit for anything. You won't.
Right. Unless you're in the grand jury room and you could say, that was my picture. They quoted my line. Judge Hulsey, anything else to encourage people to apply? That's the purpose of this whole presentation today.
Well, you have heard from those who certainly know better than anyone else, and those are people who have served as civil grand jurors. What I would like to say is that our court is deeply grateful to the service of all of our civil grand jurors. We read the reports, certainly I read the reports, and am so impressed every year with the dedication of members of the community who are not getting a lot of pats on the back. They're getting thank yous at the end, but they're doing all of this work in secret, 20 to 30 hours a week, and it's in secret, so they can't even tell anybody about all the work they're doing, but it is apparent, and the quality of the reports. And I believe that our community is so well served from the work of these jurors. Many people don't have the time or wherewithal to be that citizen who can perform the oversight role that is so important in a participatory democracy. We can certainly serve on juries, criminal juries or civil juries. We can vote, we can participate in different ways, but this is a very special way of participating, and it benefits the entire community. So I would just like to express our gratitude.
Well, thank you very much. That were Judge Stephanie Hulsey, Arthur Rolston, Kim Horowitz, Tom Motley, and back in the corner there, Gary Hoffmann. And thank you all so much for this really wonderful presentation. And hopefully we can get you back maybe in 6 months when reports come out, and maybe we can go over those reports. Anyway, for KSQT Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale, this is Joe Truscott. Thank you so much for listening.